In fiction, race or gender swapping occurs when an established character's race or gender is changed. For example, the original Nick Fury character in Marvel is a white man, but his character was changed to a black man in the Ultimates, the comics, and in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, with Samuel L. Jackson, of course, famously playing the new version of Nick Fury. As another example, the original Dr. Smith in the TV show Lost in Space, and also the later movie, is a man, but the Netflix reboot made the character a woman. Now, as would be expected, some people get very angry when a character is race or gender swapped. Some are open about their racist or sexist reasons for this anger. They're clear they do not want females and non-white people in certain roles. Other people criticize a swap by asking why there was a swap instead of either creating a new character or focusing on a less well-known existing character. For example, a critic of the He-Man Master of the Universe reboot might be angry that King Grayskull was changed from white to black, and raise the critical question, what about Clamp Champ? And Clamp Champ, I wasn't aware of this myself, but Clamp Champ is a black character in Masters of the Universe, and not yet in the new series, or perhaps never in the new series. Now, such questions can be asked in bad faith. The person asking them makes it clear that they're angry that minorities and women are allowed to take traditional white male roles. As such, it is not that they want new women or new minority characters, or more focus on existing female or minority characters. This is just a cover for their racism and sexism. In fact, when raised in good faith, these questions need not be racist or sexist. Because of this, these questions do serve very well in this role, because they are not overtly racist or sexist themselves. Now, unfortunately, these questions are now well established as dog whistles and allow people to hide their racism and sexism from normies while sending a clear signal to those in the know. The fact that other people do use them without racist or sexist intent helps maintain their innocuous appearance. Someone using them as racist or sexist tools can claim, in bad faith, that they are just asking reasonable questions. They're just asking questions. And they go on to rage that the SJWs are ruining everything by compelling these race-gender swaps and forcing diversity. So those who call them out on this can seem kind of crazy, because they're just asking questions. They're just asking, why can't you create new characters, or why can't you focus on old characters? But let us ask these questions in good faith. The most obvious practical reason as to why race or gender swapping is used, instead of creating a new character or focusing on an established character, is, well, let's be honest, money. Creating and branding a new character and building up a fan base takes time and resources. There's also no guarantee that it'll be successful. So, as an example, keeping the Nick Fury character while making him black made much more practical sense than creating a new character to serve as the head of S.H.I.E.L.D. While less well-known characters can become a great success, for example, see the Guardians of the Galaxy, they were not particularly well-known but very successful, this is of course risky. There are usually reasons why lesser-known characters are less well-known. Now, this only explains why a new character was not created, money, or why focus is not shifted, money. But it does not explain why the race or gender swap occurred. It explains, why there's not a new character or a shift in focus, but doesn't explain the swap. Fortunately, such swaps are very easy to explain, and they can even be justified, at least in some cases. Now, while some critics claim that the liberals, the feminists, and SJWs are forcing companies to gender or race swap, the companies seem to be doing this for the same reason they do almost anything. Again, money. Their marketing and research folks are aware that demographics and perceptions have changed, so whereas fiction dominated by white male characters was the big moneymaker in the past, more diverse character lineups are appealing to audiences now. If these changes were utterly political and truly hated by most, these swaps would be consistent and presumably constant failures, because people would hate them and they would not pay to view them. This is not to make the absurd claim that they all succeed, just that they do not seem to be unusually prone to financial failure. After all, there is a legion of white male-dominated failures. And so, again, I'm not claiming that this is the recipe for success. It's just they don't seem to be failing at an unusual rate, which is what you would expect if they were so universally, hated for this swapping. So, given this, you don't need any nefarious conspiracy theories about the swaps, that the liberals or SJWs are behind it all. This is just business trying to maximize profits by minimizing cost and exploiting established brands. Demographics and values are changing. This explains both the swaps and the rage at the swaps. It is also worth noting that despite the hyperbole about Hollywood, broadly taken, not having new ideas, new characters actually do get created quite often. Netflix, for example, floods its service with new shows and new characters, which often include female characters and non-white characters, sometimes in the lead roles. And attempts are made to focus on characters that have been overlooked. These efforts often make people ask, again, why not create a new character very mad? Why are they mad? Well, it's not that they're mad that just that there's being swaps. They seem to be mad that there are more representation of women and minorities in fiction. So when they rage against the people that ask the question, why not create a new character, also say in other videos, or maybe even the same video, get very angry at new characters that are created that are women or minorities, that seems to expose the fact that they are asking the question in bad faith. Because if they really wanted new characters to be created, they would be consistent and be critical of the swap, but then say this new show with a main female character is great. It's great to see them creating new diverse characters. And sometimes to be fair, sometimes you do see that, but not that often. So aside from money, are there good reasons to race gender swap rather than simply create a new character or focus on an existing character? Now, one excellent aesthetic reason, that's to say in the realm of art and beauty, that's part of philosophy, is that doing so can make for an interesting plot that explicitly explores the influence of race and gender on the character and story. For example, the first episode of Marvel's What If series explores what would have happened if Peggy Carter had become a super soldier rather than Steve Rogers. This swap has a meaningful impact on the story in part because of the assumed gender roles of that time and, of course, now. I do think this is one of the best aesthetic justifications for such swaps. Obviously, some people get very angry about such explorations, so they're not mad so much, well, I guess they're mad at the swap, but they're also mad at what the swap does in terms of exposing the differences in the roles. A good aesthetic reason, especially in a reboot of a series or movie, is to use the gender or race swap to create new story and character dynamics. While the focus in these cases is not on exploring explicitly race gender issues, these do become new elements for an old character and telling a new story. This also tends to make some people very mad for some reason. Now, there are also various moral reasons to make such changes. One reason is to provide people with characters they can more easily identify with. While critics will claim that people should be able to identify with, for example, any hero that's heroic, this actually would favor allowing such swaps. After all, if people can identify with any, for example, hero, then it would not matter if they were race or gender swapped. Another moral reason is to help foster what are known as parasocial relationships, using the power of established characters. Now, these parasocial relationships essentially, they'll sound kind of odd, but when people read fiction, view plays, watch movies, they form, and this need not be unhealthy, although it can be, they form, fictional relationship with the characters. They start to like them, identify with them, etc. And this can become pathological in the form of people worshiping celebrities, but it can be healthy. People can have good, healthy, fictional relationships, as odd as that sounds, with characters. They can like these characters, be influenced by them, etc. And one reason why racists and sexists dislike diversity in fiction is that people can form these healthy parasocial relationships, and this can make them more tolerant. If someone, reads about characters of a different race than them, different gender, different experiences, they can become more tolerant and understanding. Not guaranteed and not always, but of course that's something that racists and sexists oppose. Their whole bread and butter, their meat and drink is, intolerance, their racism and their sexism. They don't want that to happen. Now, there are also bad reasons to race or gender swap. Now, some people might consider the make money reason to be a bad one, which is not unreasonable from an aesthetic or moral standpoint. If the swap is purely to make money, and it has no aesthetic or moral justification, then criticism would seem warranted. But of course, a swap could make money and also be independently warranted on ethical or aesthetic grounds. Also, a person would need to be consistent in such criticisms. If someone considers making money to always be a bad reason to do things, which is not a terrible position, consider an analogy to other branding. The Toyota Corolla of today is radically different from what it was when I was a kid, as you might imagine. Technology has changed dramatically, and the new Toyota is nothing like the original Toyota, except obviously it's like a car with wheels, etc., but radically different. But of course they keep the brand name because doing so is advantageous and helps make money. But people generally don't get very angry that they still call the Corolla, even though the current Corolla is a radical tech swap from the original Corolla. But people, I'm sure there's somebody who's really mad. There's probably some blog somewhere people's raging against this, but in general you don't see a lot of anger about people keeping brands, even though what's in the brand now is radically different than what was before. But a person should be consistent. If they think that companies should not do things to make money, then they should be consistent about that across the board, which would be fine. Also, as noted earlier, some people claim that the swaps are compelled by political actors, such as the liberals, the SJWs, and, of course, feminists. Now, if a swap were just the result of political compulsion, and it lacked all ethical and aesthetic merit, then that swap should be criticized, because it would have no aesthetic or moral merit to it. But a swap could be compelled, but also independently warranted on ethical or aesthetic grounds. Now, it's also worth mentioning once again the obvious. These companies are, capitalist companies in a capitalist system. They're motivated by profit, and even their political stands are presumably shaped by the bottom line. And even if they were driven by politics or ideology, you'd still need to show that the politics and ideology are in fact bad. I mean, they usually are, but for different reasons than people usually present when criticizing race and gender swaps. So while most swaps are most likely motivated by hope of profits, there are good reasons to race gender swap a character rather than simply creating a new one. But creating new characters or focusing on less well-known characters are also good options. It all depends on what one is trying to do. Ideally, the swap would tell a better story, but there's nothing inherently wrong with swapping for any number of reasons. So stay safe, and I'll see you in the future.